Hey everyone, this is Steve from Commercial Forest Products coming to you from the Wood Layer. Okay, so for a while now I've been wanting to do a video on roasted maple wood, but I kept going back and forth, like, okay, how do we present it? What would be a good compelling way to put some roasted maple on YouTube, get it out in front of people? I'm not freaking Steven Spielberg. Just go ahead and grab a bunch of blanks of roasted wood and put it on YouTube. So that's what we're doing here today. And so I've grabbed a bunch of blanks, and mostly figured, and even though probably we do more plain unfigured roasted maple than we do figured, but I grabbed figured because basically figured is more interesting to look at, and why should I sit here on camera trying to show you how cool something is, or trying to explain how cool something is when I can just show you? And so it's easier to do that with figured maple. So here we go. Okay, I am going to start off. I did grab a couple of blanks of plain sawn sugar maple. That is plain sawn. You can see by the grain it's plain sawn, and it has been roasted. This one actually probably was originally in our figured pile, but because the figure is so light, a lot of times we'll take a blank like this and just ship it or sell it as plain, unless someone specifically doesn't want any grain or any figure at all. There's something that's got this light amount of curl to it, we'll go ahead and just sell it as plain sawn, unfigured. Here's maybe a little better example. This one is a little bit more plain sawn. We've got the grain cathedral nicely centered. There's a little bit of flame coming in on the side here, but it's almost unnoticeable, but it's there. And again, this may have been just based on the way that it looks on the side here. You can see kind of a ripple effect coming down the side, that this probably was originally in our figured pile and was graded out into unfigured. And these are 5/4 thickness. We also do 4/4, 6/4, and 8/4. Now, this is an interesting product that I really like. These are Birdseye Maple fretboards. The stack I happened to grab was for 5 and 6 string bass, but we do them in 4 string bass and 4 string guitars as well. I think the thickness is running about, these look like 3/8 to me, either 3/8 or 5/16. It's fretboard thickness. So what we got here is Birdseye Maple. This is an interesting board here because it's quarter sawn, but it shows Birdseye, which is really unusual. You don't see that very often. I'm going to hold it up close. You can see the grain runs pretty vertical here. So this is a quarter sawn board, and normally in quarter sawn maple, if you see Birdseye and it's quarter sawn, the eyes are, for lack of a better word, turned sideways, and you don't really see the eyes that well. In this board, you can actually see them well. So this is a cool one. I like this one, and it's got some interesting color variation here. A lot of Birdseye running through the board. It is 5 inches wide by 30 inches long. This is what we call our calico Birdseye roasted maple. This has got all cool colors in it. I mean, it's just, we've got mineral, we've got heartwood, we've got sapwood, we've got things just running through the board, and it's super dense Birdseye. I mean, just really tight stuff. Same thing on the back. Just, when you're looking for really wild colors, this is a product I like. Another board, same thing. Just super high density Birdseye, all roasted. This one, more uniform color, a completely sapwood board, even though it's roasted darker, but it's all sapwood. There's no heartwood. You can still distinguish the heartwood from the sapwood, but there's a little bit of mineral running here. Kind of makes it interesting. Some color variation on the back. This occasionally we get streaks like this in our calico roasted Birdseye maple. And they almost look like ambrosia streaks, but they're not. They are streaking of some sort, so some type of mineral streak, but the way they run, it almost looks ambrosia. Let's see, color on the back. This one's essentially full sapwood, but with real tight, dense Birdseye. So this is the kind of thing we look for in our Birdseye. We like it really tight. We like the eyes large when possible. It's not always possible. We'll take dense Birdseye is probably our first grading criteria, but after the figure density, we're looking for the size of the eye. And these actually are decent size eyes. They're not huge, but the density is amazing. And again, this is a 5-inch wide board to give you some perspective on how many bird's eye are packed into this. And it runs completely up and down the board like this. Yeah. Again, calico bird's eye, just super tight, dense figure. And wild colors. So I'm going to go ahead and move these over. The next thing I want to show you here is some curly plain sawn maple. This looks like a 5/4 by 4 inch by 30 inches long. And we've got, you can see how the figure runs, the flames run tight down the side. This would be the quarter sawn view, but it's a plain sawn blank, as you can see. Nice grain, wild grain, and wild flame. Oh, here's one more bird's eye. But this is a good example of really large eye. This is about as large as bird's eye gets. And I'm going to go ahead and wipe this down for a second so you can see what the bird's eye actually looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and wipe this down with some water. And you might say, hey, don't put water on that wood. It's wood. Are you crazy? But this is roasted wood, and part of being roasted means that it is super dry, and it's not moisture, not waterproof, but we say extremely moisture resistant. Waterproof is basically means there's no way any moisture is going to creep into this wood no matter what you do to it, and it's a pretty black and white statement. We say extremely water resistant because it is possible for there to be some variation in the moisture, but it's so minimal that it's, for all practical purposes, waterproof in the way most woodworkers or luthiers use the wood. So I'm going to go ahead and wet this down. Oh, and I'm not really a corporate shill, but I'm going to go ahead and hold this up to the camera, because if anybody out there from Corona is watching this, I'll certainly take a sponsorship from you. Go ahead and hit me up in the comments. Okay, so here we go. This will really make the grain pop, and you'll see what I'm talking about in terms of large eyes. Okay, so this is the bird's eye. This blank is about 3 1/4 inches thick. No, 3 1/4 inches wide, and the eyes, it's just got a really wild, nice figure to it. If we could get all the eyes like this, it would be amazing, but unfortunately, oftentimes we're dealing with smaller eyes, but these just look so nice and so distinctive that when we can get large eye with swirling grain around the radius, it just pops really nice, and we love this kind of wood. So, actually, this leads me to another point. Speaking of water, occasionally we're asked about moisture resistance and how waterproof or how water resistant are these roasted woods. So I brought in my trusty Wagner moisture meter, which I strongly recommend you get if you don't have one. This is probably the best investment. I have no affiliation with Wagner, but I've had this tool for a long time. This is the Wagner MMC 205, probably the best investment I made in terms of lumber tools. Don't get a cheap moisture meter. This is kind of a low-end one, but what I like about it, by Wagner standards I should say, it's probably one of the lower-end moisture meters that you can just lay on the wood. I don't like the ones with the pins in them. I don't like sticking pins into the wood, even though I know a lot of times it's not significant, but I like the idea of just being able to lay it on the wood and get a reading. So I've already calibrated this to the correct wood density, which is 0.6 for maple. And so if you want to see, well, how dry is this? Normally we get woods that are kiln dried that are, they basically run between 7 and 10% moisture content. With roasted woods, we're looking at, let's see, just go ahead and lay it on here. This is 4%. Well, hold it so you can see it. 4% moisture content, and that is really dry. That's not something you're going to get by just acclimating it. the roasting process goes all the way through the wood, through the middle of the wood. This moisture meter will run, I think, 3/4 of an inch deep into the wood. And so, unless we're looking at like a 16/4 thick board, we know what it's reading about in the middle of the board. That's another reason why you want a decent quality moisture meter. You don't want to know specifically just the moisture that's on the surface. You want it to go penetrate the wood. And I like it to penetrate the wood without using any pins of any sort. So this is the Birdseye piece that I just watered. This is the Birdseye piece that I just watered down. I'm going to go ahead and check the moisture reading on that. It says 11%. Okay. Here we've got not roasted wood, but this is actually big leaf maple. This is curly big leaf maple. It looks like a quarter sawn piece. And I brought it out because I wanted to show the color, how our color compares to unroasted big leaf western maple. And so we roast to a color that's a little bit darker than what you'd see on western big leaf maple. But again, this has not been roasted. We do roast some of this as well, but I just kind of brought this up for color comparison's sake. Here we've got more curly plain sawn, just beautiful tight curls going all the way through this board. Do it so that light hits. And that's kind of another thing we look for, is we like to see the figure running consistently through the piece. It's cool when the figure runs real tight or really dense, but it's a bit of a problem when it starts out dense and then by the time it gets to the other side of the board or the end of the board, it's not dense anymore. So that kind of defeats the purpose. What we like to see is consistent figure running through the board. And this is another good example. Basically, it's curly. It's curly. And you can see the flames running down the side. Got it on the face, back face, the other side, and on the front face. I mean, basically, when you've got four sides covered, you're good. Here's another piece. Kind of runs a little bit in and out on this one. So I would say this is not a great example. It's still nice figure, don't get me wrong, but this is kind of what I'm talking about. It's down here, it gets kind of heavy and wild. And then at this point, it eases up a little bit. So it's not a bad blank, but it's not quite as consistent as we like to see. This one, we've got similar figure running throughout the entirety of the board. It's not super strong, but it's consistent. But see, actually, this is an interesting point here. Let's see, let me grab that towel again. So I'm just kind of wetting this down so it pops even more. And holding it up for you. And this is just a nice piece here. Very tight, not tight, I'd say, very curly figure. But one thing I don't like about this blank so much is that it kind of eases up a little bit on the other side. So it's still figured on both sides, but I'd say this side looks heavier and wilder than this side, which is a bit of a problem. So this wouldn't be like an ideal blank from my perspective, because when you're carving into it, it's one thing if you're using it as a one-face application, but for the most part, everybody using this is carving into it. So when you carve into the halfway through, is it going to look like this face or is it going to look like this face? It's a combination of both. But if I had to guess, I would look on the edges to see, because you're looking at a heavy face here and a not so heavy face here. What's the middle going to look like? Go to the edge. Have you seen a lot of flames here? Not really. So my guess is, probably about halfway through this board, it's going to shift from pretty flamey. One thing we also look for, we like to see consistency through the board. And here's a great example. I've got one face, it's just tight curl through the board, top to bottom. Side looks great. Other face looks equally as figured. You're good to go with this one. This is probably the best in the batch here in terms of tight figure. This is actually a 6/4 board, and it's just super tight on the edge, on the face, the other edge. And when you see it on all four sides, you can't go wrong.